This is the Balanced Growth Show with Dr. Travis Perry, helping successful business professionals like you achieve balance in their lives.
Welcome to another episode of the Balanced Advisor podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Perry, and today we're with John Middleton. John is the owner of Brighton Financial Planning, serving roughly 90 clients in 15 states. He's also the current chairperson and major conferences chair for the FPA of New Jersey. John has an MBA in finance and the CFA, the CAIA, AIF, and CFP designations. Welcome, John, to the podcast.
Thank you, Travis. Excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. It's been fun getting to know you and hearing about your business. But share with us, how did you get here? We talked a little bit about the CAIA. I was not familiar with that designation and had something to do with your progress as a financial planner. But tell us your story. Like, how did you get into the industry? How did you become, the owner of your firm?
Yeah, it goes back like a lot of people, I think, in our industry. Coming out of college, I went to Rutgers University here in New Jersey and went to work for Merrill Lynch right out of school. Mother Merrill. It seems, everybody at some point, if you're my age, worked for Merrill Lynch at some point in your career. So I was there briefly, moved on after a short period at Merrill Lynch to an insurance company, worked there for a short number of years, decided to go back to grad school and get my master's degree. While doing that at night, I worked for Raymond James down in St. Petersburg, Florida, where they're headquartered. And I worked there in a couple of different roles. Actually, over the years, worked in, I think, 4 different roles for Raymond James. Was in their partnership investment banking group, their traditional investment banking group, moved over to their mutual fund company. At the time, it was called Heritage. Now it's Carillon Tower. Then moved to work for one of their individual managers up here in New York City, AWAD Asset Management. Moved from them to another insurance company's capital management group, then to Invesco. And that's where the CAIA comes in. When I was at Invesco, I was in the quantitative strategies group, managing part of a team that managed money for institutional investors, endowments, foundations, governments, et cetera, unions. And one of our strategies was in market neutral and another one was in managed futures. So while being involved in those strategies, I went and got the Chartered Alternative Investment Analyst designation, CAIA, and I've had that ever since. So, in the discussion of achieving balance, in 2008, I was sitting in an airport the day after Memorial Day. I had flown to New Orleans. This is pre-Zoom, pre-GoToMeeting, et cetera, for a lunch meeting with a client, one of the energy companies down there. So I left the house at 4:00 in the morning to drive to the airport, get on a plane, fly to New Orleans, do a lunch meeting at noon, done at 1:00, back at the airport. Thanks to thunderstorms in the Northeast, I was delayed leaving New Orleans. Finally left New Orleans at 5:00 or so, 6:00 their time. Got up to New Jersey. The storms were still here, so they were circling over the airport. After a period of time, rerouted us to Baltimore to refuel. Got us refueled. Had to wait for 18 other planes to take off. Finally landed in Newark at 12:15 and got home at 2. So I left the house at 4 a.m., got home at 2 a.m. for a 1-hour lunch meeting. And as I was sitting in the airport killing time, I figured out that in the prior year, I had flown 130,000 miles, which was my average while working for Invesco. And it worked out to essentially 6 full business weeks, either in an airplane or waiting to get on or get off an airplane. And at the time, I had a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. And I thought to myself, this is, I can't keep doing this. My wife and I both worked. And we used to sit at the kitchen table with BlackBerries, which is, pre-Apple iPhone years, or really the introduction, and figure out our calendars. And finally said, I can't do this. So at one point early in my career, I had been a mutual fund wholesaler. And I called on a lot of independent advisors in the Northeast. And I had learned from them that at that time, if you were trying to, retire from the business, you either turned the lights off and left your clients to themselves. You sold to an insider, someone who worked for you, or you sold to someone else. So I started looking around for a firm in my area of New Jersey that might have fit the parameters of someone who'd be thinking about selling. And fortunately found one whose office was about 3 miles away from where I lived. Joined him. We had a verbal agreement that I would work for him for a period of time, and if things worked out, that he would sell the firm to me. So I joined him in August of 2008, weeks before the financial crisis really hit, and which was an interesting experience for me, moving from what you would call an agent role, at Invesco to a principal role. And then I bought the firm in January of 2010. So we're coming up on almost 14 years, I guess, that I've been in this role. So a pretty varied career.
What a journey.
Yeah.
And, I'm just looking at the notes, 130,000 miles.
Yeah.
6 weeks of time. That's incredible. You may have the frequent flyer award here on the Balance Advisor podcast. I think that may take the cake. There may be others, chime in, guys and gals, if you have something similar, but yeah. I mean, we're going to talk about balance. It sounds like you jumped out of the career, spot that you're in to get greater balance, right? That really was the reason why you wanted to take this path. And how has it been since you've made this career change? How has balance changed for you, or have you just found other struggles that kind of filled in for what you were lacking there?
No, it actually worked out. I have no complaints as I look back. I really enjoyed my time in Invesco, and I had a lot of responsibility for clients outside of the United States, which was a great experience. But you spent a lot of time on airplanes, and to your point, I do have a 1,000,000-miler designation with United Airlines, which I'm sure there are others in your audience that have that. But well over 1,000,000 miles. But transitioning when I did, my children were approaching. My daughter was in middle school, and my son was approaching that, and both were very active in sports. And I enjoyed coaching their sports, particularly my son. I was a youth football coach, and I was able to do a lot more, both as less as a coach, because they were getting to the point where they were moving outside of my ability to coach them, but to be able to participate, to be able to attend their games, and watch them mature through high school and into college. They're now both out of college. That meant a ton to me, that I wouldn't necessarily have been able to do if I had stayed in the role I was in, because of the responsibility that I had ex-US. So, I found a pretty good balance. I was able to, do what I do here, take the firm. When I bought it, we were a little over $40 million. We're now just shy of 90 million in assets. So continue to grow the firm, but still be able to be an active, parent in the process over the years. And that was, to me, extremely important. It may not be to everybody else, but for me, it was what I was trying to achieve. So no complaints as I look back.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, so for you, balance really is about being an active parent, being there for your kids.
Yeah.
What would you say now that you've taken the company from 40 to 90? What would you say, as you've been scaling the business and growing it, that your biggest struggle has been to try to keep that balance that you left, the prior career for, to create this new, ideal for you?
Yeah, it's probably the continual introduction of technology that makes you ever available. I have an iPhone. It's always on me. I have my business email loaded on the phone. I use a VoIP phone system, so when the phone rings in my office, It rings to my cell phone. So, that's probably the biggest challenge is now in this world that we're in today, you don't have to be physically present in the office to still be constantly available. So you're constantly trying to balance that. You want to be available to your clients. You want them to know that you're available to them because they are entrusting you in many cases with all they have in terms of investable assets, their livelihoods. But at the same time, you want to be present with the people that you're physically in a room or at an event with. So that's probably the biggest juggle is knowing when to not answer the phone, when to hit ignore, or read the email and say, I can get back to that tomorrow morning or on Monday. That's probably still the biggest challenge, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I find that's a big challenge for so many advisors these days. It's the ever-present technology of phone, watch, iPad, computers, that is really difficult if you don't have boundaries, if you don't have rules, if you don't have parameters, right? As you mentioned. So as you've been, scaling and growing and trying to keep this balance with technology, but that actually has helped you, right? It's helped you to be virtual. It's helped us to connect.
Right.
And it's going to help you with your clients going forward. So I think there is a delicate balance, if you would, between embracing technology, which advisors do. Like advisors, we're very techy. We're at least tech friendly.
Yeah.
Not saying that we're all high tech, but I like to say I'm mid tech. I know where my boundaries are, and and I'd say a lot of us are, at least friendly with it because we have to be, right? And our industry has evolved so much. But what have you done to be successful with it? It's kind of an Achilles heel. What have you done to try to stave off this desire to basically not be present, but wanting to be present with those you care about?
Yeah, from a client standpoint, it's just being conscious that there comes a time, and I think the clients are aware of that. As we've gone through, it came up with a client yesterday, as a matter of fact. As we've gone through COVID, so March of 20 through now, I think the thing that is crystal clear to almost all of us is how easily everything can be taken away from you, and how important quality of life is. We've moved to this virtual world where we do so much via Zoom, GoToMeeting, Teams. We have, as you said, we've got the watch, the iPad, the iPhone. The clients are much more aware as well that quality of life matters, and it matters to all of us. So from that perspective, it's being conscious that your client in California is sending you an email at 9 p.m., but it's 6 p.m. their time. They're not necessarily looking for an immediate response, and knowing that you don't have to jump on your computer and get out an answer immediately. You can wait overnight, because even though they're sending you something, unless they marked it urgent, it probably isn't urgent in that instance. You can wait. So it's being conscious about that and appreciating that.
And John, as you're managing a firm, how, I know you have other advisors and staff, how do you lead the firm in showing that direction? Do you give training to them? Is it just unspoken? Do you go to conferences and learn about it? Like what is your firm doing really to stay ahead on the technology curve, but keep that present balance?
Yeah, it's excuse me. It's there's basically three of us on the team here, and my perspective is if I want to do this, if I want to be in a position where I can work remotely, and we pretty much all do it nowadays, but if I wanted to be in that position, then I certainly had to make that option available to the other two people on my team. Lead by example, I guess is the word. I'm not gonna do something that benefits me at the expense of or the exclusion of the other two people on my team. And then so they know as well that if they need to work remote, they can work remote. If they need to take time off for family, they can take time off for family, because I'm going to do that. So there's no reason for me to not, make that same perk available to the other two as well. And I think that works. One of the others is the person I bought the firm with. He's continued to work with me since on sort of a part-time basis. And my lead financial planner joined the firm a year after I did. She joined in 2009 and has been here for going on 14 years as well. And I think in large part because we do have that kind of working relationship that she knows that she can do, she can have that balance outside of work. She can have the time off. We don't have a formal, vacation schedule or anything like that. So we just, we've set ourselves up with the technology that we need to do our jobs wherever we are. And we know if we get things done, then, that's the overriding objective. Get things done and make sure the clients are happy, content, comfortable that we're getting the job done for them.
Yeah, I'm literally recording this podcast from the library. My kids are attending a conference. I'm popping in once in a while. It's kind of a last minute thing, but I've got my iPad, I've got my microphone, my light, my phone, where I'm keeping notes for this podcast. I can literally do this from anywhere in the world. And that's the beauty of technology. Yet we do need to have these boundaries, right? These parameters to keep us from being everywhere all at the same time. So I love that you say, lead by example. Another aspect of this, at least at our firm, I don't really take appointments on Friday, but I was finding my sales and my service team, they were there on Fridays. I just said, hey, you know what? If I'm leaving Friday, I don't want you guys scheduling anything Friday. If you want to come in on Friday, here's a key. Like, you can do that. Be responsible. But I don't want you taking appointments on Friday and feel like you have to be here. Right. Let's do a 4-day work week, and then let's work with that. So I love what you're saying, like you're practicing what you're preaching here. And full disclosure, I get to come in and speak for FPA in New Jersey, which I'm really excited about very soon. And this may have actually aired after the fact, but you and I both talked about the industry. Like, advisors struggle with everything you just said. Yeah. They struggle with balance. They struggle with using technology properly and having parameters, getting home for their family. I literally just putting together some marketing materials and remembering that a client of mine said that he, with his young family, was only home to dinner 4 nights a month early on in his career. He's going, wait, how am I doing this for? Well, what is this all about? And it was hard because he was growing his firm. He was, in management and trying to do that. Yeah. So kind of turning this to the industry in general, which this is a great place. We're not throwing anybody under the bus. It's the industry. We can throw the industry under the bus. But what do you see for most advisors? What are their biggest struggles for them having balanced growth, being able to scale their business and keep their balance?
Yeah, I think you hit it right there with your client who can't get home for dinner. It's not necessarily a time management argument there, most likely for him. I remember early in my career as a wholesaler, it was the nature of the job. I would fly out on a Monday and fly home on a Thursday. And I would very frequently do dinner meetings Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights, or speak at a dinner seminar or a dinner client appreciation dinner. And that's the way the industry was organized back then. You would do breakfast meetings and you would do dinner meetings and you'd work all day in between. Today, there's less of that. There's less of the seminars and such. But your client sounds like he's a younger advisor, younger relative to me at least. And he's probably working with clients his age because that's the norm. Our clients tend to resemble the advisor, which means that his clients probably are working full time, and the time they have available to meet with him is 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. And so he's got to manage around that. The way I tend to address that is we make ourselves available for those kind of meetings. I have a client meeting at 5:00 tonight, Eastern time, a couple hours. But we do that from where we want to be. So my lead planner is going to be on that call, and she's going to do it from home. I will probably do it from home as well. So that's one way, that we can sort of work around that. Again, in this world of technology that we all live in today, I have an office here in Flemington. I actually live in Virginia, and I have a vacation house in South Carolina. And I essentially have an office set up in all three locations. Office, obviously, that's what this room is here. In Virginia, I have an office that has all of the same equipment, basically the same setup as I have in this office in New Jersey. And in South Carolina, I have the same setup. So I can work from any of those locations. And whether it's a virtual background in a call like this, or whatever I choose to do, from the client, the prospect, the community meetings I do, the FPA meetings, et cetera, they don't know necessarily where I am. So that flexibility helps manage in a way that, I couldn't do when I was at Invesco, and really couldn't do in the early years of my career. I think, I've mentioned this several times, that COVID really changed how we approach the business. I think I would not have considered that pre-March of 2020 that we would do much of anything in this Zoom world that we're in today. And now it's virtually entirely this way. So from a client, from our perspective as advisors managing that time, it's having that adaptability, or that flexibility to do it where, from home, from a library, wherever you may be. I've seen people do the meetings, in their car. They put the phone on the stand in the car, and they're driving and, listening in. But to manage that balance is to be conscious, is to say, can we do it? Can we squeeze it in at lunch? We did a meeting today with someone who works for one of the local pharmaceutical companies here, and she slotted us. She fit us into her lunch schedule, which works for me. That fits. So instead of doing those dinner meetings or dinner calls, look for an opportunity to slot them in and use, the window the client has in the middle of the day to jump on a call. So many of us work from home now that the clients working full-time, have that flexibility, to take a half hour blocked out and jump on a call with their advisor.
Appreciate that. Would you say that, you see a lot of advisors, you're, in leadership really with FPA, what their concerns are. Would you say that most of them struggle with time management issues? And what would you say those specifically are? If we're talking about being flexible and being present, we know that's an issue. I guess what I'm asking is, do advisors have a time management program? Are they struggling with this? Do they need help here?
Yeah, I don't think most of us have a formal time management program. We live by our calendars. So in that concept, we have a time management. It's not like the old, day timers with our schedules loaded, written down in there. And I don't think for most of the advisors, certainly the ones that I've worked with on, in the FPA of New Jersey, and that I know in the community, it's not a time management issue in that they're not getting work done on time. It's trying to be too accessible to everybody. That leads to, the 12, 14-hour days. I think there is some struggle with that. And I think maybe even more so with those advisors that are in that growth phase of their business, the 30 to 40, 45-year-olds who are really, really trying to ramp up their their client base and their assets under management, whatever model they're using, that's, they're really struggling with that. I think more so than an advisor at my stage, who is still growing, but has that secure foundation, and tenure, and ownership for that matter, that they may not have themselves. So yeah, there's no formal, I don't think, other than your Outlook or Google Calendar, I don't know if there is a formal time management thing these days. So that's the struggle.
Yeah, I think that there's a big struggle. I've done some research on that. I found that most advisors, it's pretty rare they have a structured. Most have hacks and tips and things that they latch on to, like time blocking, or I'm going to calendar things, which is wonderful. But if I pursued it and really asked and pushed, most are saying, nah, we don't really have a program. We don't have anything that we follow. No rules, no specifics. So what for advisors, what advice would you give them if they don't have a time management program, if they're kind of picking up tips and hacks and they want to be more productive, but they know that it's an aspect of balance. I talk about this in the book, Achieving Balance. There's really 3 myths. The first one is you can't do everything at the same time. It's impossible. We talk about being present. You can really only focus on the things that are most important, then you feel balanced. But how do you do that with work and everything else in your life? Well, now you have an ideal calendar. And that's kind of where I'm getting at. I think a lot of advisors, they don't have an ideal calendar. They know it's a good principle. I mean, it's from the 90s. It's nothing brand new, but they're not using it. They're not letting it direct them. Instead, they tend to be reactive in nature, which we know ends up, with some issues. But
Right.
What advice would you give those advisors who are struggling? Veterans in the industry, beginners, it doesn't matter. Like, I found this throughout the board, across the board. What advice would you say, hey, here's a couple of things I've learned from my life that have helped me to have greater balance?
Yeah. For me, I think that the most significant is understanding, kind of that 80-20 rule. Figure it out, within your daily activity, your schedule, where's the most, what's the most impactful thing you do during the day? And that's the focus. The things that you do that maybe aren't really, contributory to your growth or to your balance, are the things that you try to eliminate. Some of that has evolved over the years. Early days of my career, you had a lot more cold calling and things of that nature that you don't do anymore. But I think that's, to me, that's probably the key thing, is understanding your individual schedule and understanding what things you do during the course of a day that maybe you don't need to do, that detract from your efficiency, from your growth, or from your balance, and strike them. If you work within a team, maybe someone else on the team is better suited to take on that responsibility. Or maybe it just isn't something you need to do at all, and emphasize what matters, what really does contribute to the things that are important to you, growing the business, having the balance, and really emphasize that at the expense of, the lesser contributors to your day, the old 80-20. Emphasize, 80% of your productivity or your balance comes from 20% of what you do. Focus on that 20. And that's individual, that's your, what may matter to you will be different, of course, than what might matter to me. So.
Great advice. I mean, the Pareto principle, right? 80-20. It's interesting. I call this the work sweet spot in the book. And I know listeners have heard me talk about this, but it's really the 5 or 6 things that are most important in your day.
Yeah. And
I found that when I've asked advisors, when we've identified those together, I'm like, here's processing, here's planning, here's, podcast, whatever it is for them, meeting with clients, like we've really detailed these out. Not only are they the most valuable time spent in these activities, but they're also the most fulfilling. And this is where most advisors, after they go through this exercise with me, their mind is blown. They go, whoa, because I typically ask them, if you could just spend 30 hours a week doing these activities, what would your work week be like? And they're like, amazing. but what you just told them to do is so true. Get those things that are most important and productive and exciting for your business. Do those and strike everything else. It's hard to let go of some of those things. There's a psychological ploy that, like, we talk delegation on this podcast a lot. But I think there's a psychological ego of, no, I don't want to let this go. I do it really well. How can you help walk an advisor off that ledge to say, just, let this go? What has been helpful for you to say, I've got to let this go, even if I do it the best, even if, I think no one else can do it better? What has helped you to get that off your plate, John?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. The first is you mentioned ego, and I think you have to some extent let go of the ego. And I apologize. Suddenly my phone has to ring, endlessly. You have to let go of the ego piece of it. And think of it more of as a team ego. Unless you're a sole practitioner and you're it, then you can kind of trust your team and work with your team. So I try to not think of myself as having an ego. It doesn't matter to me if I'm the one that's pitching the client or the prospect or my lead planner is. It's so put that aside first. And then the second is being honest with yourself and really being willing to acknowledge what you're good at and or what you like to do. They may not be necessarily the same thing. I apologize. That phone call looks like it's a spam call because it keeps ringing, the same numbers ringing over and over again, and it's not a client. And for me, I'll give the example. For me is within our practice, I emphasize the investment piece of it. That's my expertise. The financial planning I get involved in, but it's not my strongest suit. Our lead planner is much more effective at it. And so, as we evolved and that became more obvious, I transitioned the financial planning to her because she's more effective at it, more efficient at it, and does a really good job. And it wasn't my strong suit. And if I had to choose between investments or planning, I would lean to the investments. You can do that if you have a team. You can't necessarily do that if you're a sole practitioner, and I get that. But if you have a team or you have support as a sole practitioner, there may be things in the support structure you can hand over to a client. If your team is better at the client servicing component of it, checking in with the client on a periodic basis, hand that off. So it's appreciating that you can let go of some of the ego and be honest with yourself in the process.
Yeah, I think you mentioned there some really important things. I love this idea of a team ego. Let go of the individual ego. It's all about the team. Like some of the best organizations I've worked with, they really focus on this team effort, which has been a big change in this industry. The ones that are really embracing this, I get it. Like they involve their team. It's about the team. It's not about them as the one lone advisor. Now, you mentioned if you're solo, there may be some support right now because of technology. You can go on Fiverr, Upwork. You can go online and get virtual support. There's virtual paraplanners. There's virtual assistants. Like the world of technology we live in, like I've got several assistants that I've never met in person. I've been working with them for years. I was a solo guy before I brought anybody in-house. And even then, my whole opinion is if you need to delegate it and it's not something you delete, can this be automated first? does it need a human? If it needs a human, can it be virtual?
Yeah.
If it can't be virtual, then hire an in-person individual. Sometimes a part-time virtual assistant, if you're solo, can really be effective. And if you're not, like I know someone who's working on recruiting right now. I've got a client who's really struggling to recruit, and a lot of advisors are right now.
Yeah.
So he's hired someone, virtually to do this and to take over, and it's been an extremely helpful scenario.
Yeah.
Well, I've loved this conversation. I'm glad we've been able to talk about the insights that you have, the leadership you've brought to this industry, and thank you for giving back, for making time. If advisors want to reach out to you, John, and connect with you or discuss
Sure.
more about what you've been through and maybe gain some insight there, what's the best way for them to do that?
Via email. Once again, the phone's always, my email is always accessible. It's John at Brighton, Brighton, financial.com. And that's probably the quickest and easiest way to get a hold of me. And obviously mention that the person reaching out found me via this podcast, your show, Travis. And I'll get back to them as quickly as I can.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you again being here on the show. You've let go of your ego to give us some of your insights and your tips, and it's greatly appreciated. I mean, really, this podcast is designed to be a place where we can talk about balance, improve ourselves in the industry, and we need leaders like you. So thanks again. And thank you everybody for listening. I mean, this podcast is nothing without you. We've been really, I can tell when the podcast picks up steam. I don't have to check numbers. I can just check my email for the requests. The rate of requests per day of being on this show have literally tripled in the last couple of months. So I know we are reaching audiences that we weren't before. Our downloads are increasing. So if this really strikes a chord with you, someone else needs to hear this, share, comment, subscribe to the podcast. We appreciate your listenership. And remember, as you're developing yourself and you're achieving balance, remember along the way, live life on purpose. Thanks again, John.
Very good. Thank you.